Islam's representatives are very economical with the truth. 1400 years of Islamic terror and history prove the plea that Islam is misunderstood has been shown to be very untruthful. A short history of the long history of Islam. Islam is persistent and uses everything in its arsenal to deceive and conquer. After all, one of the names of Allah is the Great Deceiver. And many of these men practice that because that's what they want to be. Everyone else is blamed for their, Islam's, actions. There are 3 books Muslims study. The Quran, which cannot be studied without Muhammad's interpretation of the Hadith. Now, the Quran is the thinnest of the books. The Hadith is a lot thicker and bigger. And then the biggest of all is the Surah, which they have to study, in which Muhammad recounts everything he did, from his sexual habits to how he dealt with unbelievers who wouldn't convert. For instance, in one case, he took 800 Jews who wouldn't convert to Islam and tied their hands behind them, including boys of 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and chopped their heads off. Very simple. The example is there. So if Muhammad is the standard, then there's no such thing as a extreme Muslim. So there's no such thing as an extreme. 60% of this literature is taken up with how to deal with us, the kafir. These books are taken up with violence. Islam is not so much a religion as a political force, and like the Nazis, use muscle on the streets to terrorize people. They not only kill Christians, but also Hindus and other religions, including other Muslims. Hence the constant blowing up of mosques and markets and churches, but especially mosques, because the Sunnis and the Shia just cannot stand each other. For 1400 years, Islam has waged incessant wars. For instance, they destroyed the classical world. What happened to all 7 churches that the letters were written to in Revelation in Asia? That is no longer Christian. Their actions nearly depopulated the whole of North Africa, and I'll prove that to you. Here is a picture of the Al-Askari Mosque. It was bombed in 2006 by Islamics. It was either a Sunni or Muslim mosque, and either one of them blew each other up. I can't remember which one it was. You can see the damage to the big dome there. The North African population was decimated. In Rome and all over the former Roman Empire in Europe, huge buildings were slowly dismantled as they were used as mines for building materials by the people. I mean, for instance, in this country we know about Hadrian's Wall, which is a very big structure, probably about 6 meters high, or between 5 and 6 meters high, yet it's only the foundations are left, because what happened to it was the surrounding people used it as a mine for building materials. It was simple. You didn't have to go and buy rocks. You just go to the wall and take them. The evidence shows that after the Islamic invasions, there were few people around to take them down in North Africa. So a lot of those buildings are well maintained. So there's whole cities there that were put up by, for instance, one African emperor. He put up a whole fabulous city there. Most of it is standing, and I remember seeing it the first time. I was quite stunned at this, how well preserved it is. All the streets and all the things were up. It's just the roofs are missing, but otherwise it was quite well preserved. This is the Roman Empire under Trajan, which was at its greatest extent. And when Hadrian became emperor, he realized it was far too big and retreated on various fronts. But Trajan got it to its greatest extent. Now, when you look at this, you can understand, except for the areas where they retreated, which are those extensive areas on the right there after Anatolia or Turkey, this was largely Christian. Well, it was always Christian, actually, under Constantine. I mean, he made it a law that all these areas had to be Christian, and so there were Christian under Constantine. So what happened? Why is the whole of North Africa, and except for Israel, right into Turkey, Egypt, and all these places now Muslim, and some of those areas of Europe across the Bosphorus there, not Christian, they are Islam. Where is the classical empire of 555 AD during the reign of Justinian I? Just look at this. This was Justinian's empire, the Constantinople, and you can see there that this is all Christian as well. What happened to this? It was all conquered except for Italy, Greece, but all the rest went under the conquests. We now see them moving into various countries of Europe. The Christian countries destroyed by Islamic wars. Remember, they're persistent, they never stop. Syria, which was Christian. Lebanon, which was Christian. Egypt, which was Christian. Turkey, Libya, Tunisia, and Sudan were all Christian nations, occupied, terrorized, and forced to convert, as happened to various nations in Europe. These countries did not just become Muslim because it was a good idea, but fought and were overcome, and it was either lose your head and your family and everything else, or you convert to Islam. So after a generation, of course, they became Islamics. It is estimated by historians that these wars by the Muslims cost 220 million lives over the 1400-year period. The Crusades, which are so denigrated, only occurred in about 9 places, and I want to emphasize that, only 9 places. And they were along the border of Syria today, down to Israel, or Palestine, if you want to call it that. The Crusaders waged war in only 9 places. The Crusades were waged to try and stop the incessant attacks coming from Islam into Europe. I mean, if you see the map of the attacks, it wasn't just 50 or 100. It is thousands of attacks that occurred, right the way from Spain, Portugal, right across into Greece and Turkey, and right across, all the way down. Thousands of attacks occurred in which lots of people died. And of course, they only turned them back at the gates of Vienna, and Charles Martel stopped them flooding into France and defeated them. But if you ask a historian, you can probably get about 4 major battles out of them that were waged against the Muslims. There's actually 580 waged by the Muslims as they took over large swathes of classical world, plus thousands of smaller battles which were waged across North Africa, Spain, into France. And of course, as I said, Charles Martel turned them back. The Barbary pirates and of course the Ottoman Empire. The Mediterranean reverted from a trading lake and became an Islamic waterway on which the brag by Muslims was Europe could not float a plank on it without them doing something about it. And so trade collapsed. I mean, you know, during the Roman Empire, we have records of the amount of trade that was going on. It was billions across that waterway between Egypt and Rome, and all over that area was billions of trade going on annually. But there was further trade that few people know about. It's only recently been realized that on the Red Sea there was a port there. And that was where all the spices and silks came in from Asia and China, etc. And then they carted it across over to the River Nile and went down the River Nile to Alexandria, where it was transported out to the rest of the Roman Empire. And this over time was trillions in money that has been identified. So when all that collapsed and all that trade was stopped and ruined, that brought on the Dark Ages, because people starved. I mean, things were not happening. The roads fell into ruin, the whole countries fell into ruination. For instance, as I've said, trillions of trade disappeared between the Far East, and that was conducted by both Constantinople and previously Rome. And that was stopped when the Islamic power took over Egypt from Constantinople. Today, European trade and oil supply routes are under threat. The whole of Europe in the Middle Ages starved as the trade collapsed. This is the same strategy now being employed as trade routes come under threat. If you get a map out and you look at that region, you will see that Iran has literal control over the Straits of Hormuz, and the Americans keep a fleet there to try and keep it open, and the Gate of Tears, which is on the other side between Yemen and Somalia. And these are now dominated by extremist Islamic governments. We call them extremists, but that's what we are looking at. So now from Somalia on the African side, we've got Somalia where they're waging war. Then we get to Ethiopia where they're attacked in the west of Ethiopia, and hundreds of thousands of Christians had to flee. This is about 8 months ago. Then we got Sudan, which is a militant country that was attacking the south and literally going to kill all the African Christians down there, except the international community did interfere, and they separated Sudan into the south and the north being the Islamic area, which is still attacking in the south, incidentally, because that is where the oil is. And the deal was that the oil would be transported through Islamic Sudan, and they would pay for that quite a goodly sum of money. But of course they don't want that, and so constantly, once again, they never stop. They keep on pecking away at this thing. And of course southern Sudan is poor, very poor still, because they've just got independence and they're having to face up to a well-organized, well-funded Islamic army in the north of Sudan. Then you've got Egypt, which controls the Suez Canal. And then we've got Libya, and then we've got, well, all these nations have now gone over. So we have now got a very bad situation, which is getting worse by the day. And as you can see, all the ongoing wars, the fact that Egypt is literally bankrupt. The Secretary of State Kerry went there the other day and said to them, what are you going to do? You've got to focus on trade, but the trade has collapsed by over 50% and going down, because who wants to go there and have their lives under threat? I mean, recently we saw that they destroyed 19 people in the gondola of a balloon. I mean, we don't know what happened there, but all we know is that the man was an idiot and he drove it through trees, etc. And of course that caused the pipe to riff out, and of course the gas to come out in the middle of something and blew up and killed all those people. One man managed to get out with the driver, who jumped as well, because he probably knew what he'd done. Now, how many attacks have occurred since the 2001 Twin Trade Centers attack? The figure is over 16,000 Islamic attacks all over the place. Tens of thousands are dying because of this. Where have the attacks been? Well, maybe you heard about Britain and then America, the Twin Towers, and of course the tubes in Britain in 2005, France, Holland, Spain, Morocco, Egypt, Lebanon, India, China, Bali, Kenya, Tanzania, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, East Timor. In the latter case, without Australian intervention, genocide on the Christian population of East Timor would have occurred by the Islamics. Christian southern Sudan was constantly attacked and finally broke away, but the attacks continue. Remember, persistency, as with Israel, plus more states are suffering. I mean, I threw in Israel right at the end there, because I'm sure many of you were probably staggered to see all the list there, and that's not the end of the list, there's a lot more. But Israel, of course, is constantly under attack, except it's taken a hard-nosed view and said, you're not going to come in here and cause the chaos caused everywhere else. And so they react to rockets slamming into their country. Peace to you all, or is it pieces? On the morning of Thursday, 7th of July 2005, 4 Islamic homegrown terrorists detonated 4 bombs, 3 in quick succession aboard London Underground trains across the city, and later a 4th on a double-decker bus in Tavistock Square in London. 52 civilians, British people, were killed, and 4 bombers were killed in the attacks, and over 700 more were injured. Now, why? What for? More rest in peace attempts for Kafirs. On the 21st of July 2005, 4 attempted bomb attacks and disrupted parts of London's public transport system 2 weeks after the 7th of July 2005 bombings, which had killed 52 civilians and injured 700 more. The explosions occurred around midday at Shepherd's Bush, Warren Street and Oval stations, on London Underground and on a bus in Shoreditch. A 5th bomber dumped his device without attempting to set it off. Thank goodness. 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. There are 4 horsemen of the apocalypse mentioned in Revelation, representing the 3 great isms to almost run concurrently at the end of the age, with each waging war. The white horse is Catholicism. The red horse is socialist communism. The black horse, capitalism. If you remember, all the suits and cars and everything of these leaders in capitalism are black, and their suits are black with black ties, white shirt. I know, I had to wear them. As a matter of fact, I sort of rebelled and nearly could have got fired for it, because when my director came down, I was in a white safari suit, and just as I was about to go through the door into the office, I heard some voices, and I had an agreement with my secretary there, and she said if anybody came from head office, she'd point the clock out towards the door, and I looked at the clock and it was pointing towards the door. I backed up and looked through the hinges, and there was my boss and the general manager, etc. And for me to be in a white safari suit in that heat would have been a capital sin. So I rushed back and got changed and came back, and we went off to lunch. And then there's the green horse. Now, the Greek is chloros, but I know in the Bibles it says pale, because the translators sort of said to each other, have you ever seen a green horse? No, well, just make it a pale. And that's what they did. But chloros means green. Now, if you look at the green of Islam, that is what it's talking about. This is the green horse riding again, because it has already ridden, remember, when, 1400 years ago it started to conquer the classical world, and it's attempting to ride again. And its name is death. Now, it's very interesting, but how many times have we seen the Islamic leaders say to the West, you like life, we like death? They hope this frightens us, because we can't stop somebody who wants to die. And that is about true. If you've got a man who's a suicide bomber, wants to blow himself up, you can't stop it. And how many times have you nearly seen planes blown about the sky? You remember going back in Britain, we had all those planes that were going to be blown up going across the Atlantic. And then the same thing is said, if few people know about it, going from Japan to America was the same plan, to blow them up, and they managed to stop both of those going ahead. But how often can our security services win all the time? All we've got to do is make one mistake. So the green horse, if you look, is trying to ride again. If you look at the mosque doors on the top of the Temple Mount, you'll see they're all green. If you look at the huge bandanas and the flags and then the things they put across the streets, they're all green. So this is the color of that, and the name is death. And incidentally, very interesting to know, but one of the Islamic marching tunes is "We come in the name of death." So, we have got an apt description of that particular horse. There's been various interpretations of that, but these interpretations, Catholicism, socialist, communism, of course the colour for socialism and communism was always red, as the capitalism colour has always been black, and as the green has always been Islamic. And why white for the Catholicism? Well, you look at the buggy that the Pope wears, his cassock and all his clothes are always white. And so that is the colour of the leader of the Catholic world. Here is a depiction of those four horsemen of the apocalypse. There's the green one, there's the black one, there's the red one, and there's the white one, which comes from a famous picture. The colours were slightly different on the picture. For instance, the red one was a sort of a reddish brown. It was almost hard to interpret. I can't remember the black, but the green was a pale colour, not a green. So I coloured this in to make it look as it should have been. I have covered this already. The green horse is called death. The Muslims and the leaders constantly say we in the West like life, the Islamics like death. One of their marching tunes, I said, is the words "we come in the name of death." Read in the Bible the books of Isaiah, chapters 15, 16, 17, where you see the direct destruction of Damascus mentioned. And then you see Isaiah 19, and then you see Egypt. And what's going to happen to Egypt and its financial collapse. And the fact that the Egyptians fear Judah. Now, I can tell you in history, this has never happened. Judah always ran from Pharaoh in the first instance. Then later on under the kings, they tended to come to agreements with Pharaoh to try and help them against the Assyrians or some other power that was up north. So it wasn't the Egyptians that feared Judah. But at the end time, it says, this is where it is, that they will fear and financial collapse. That is happening right now. All this is happening right now. Morsi is focused on trying to make an Islamic state, trying to get 100% vote for his parliament and whatever. And when Kerry was there, saying, what are you doing? You've only got 4 billion, but for 80 million people to buy food overseas and everything else, you're running out of money. And he said, they weren't listening. And so Egypt is running into financial difficulties. I mean, Egypt is going to fall from where it is right now, right to the floor. And then, of course, they're going to get into this terrible war, which is coming. Then read Psalm 83 to see what is being planned for the Jewish state. Now, when I first read that, there's 2 or 3 Islamic peoples that weren't there. And I thought, well, we have got time, because they're not there. Because I know the Bible is terribly accurate. I mean, very accurate. Nothing I've seen in the Bible has ever been wrong. So I thought, well, it's not that. Then I was stunned to see these northern Caucasian and tribes there and supplying arms and also people into that war in Syria. And of course, Russia is there. We've got a lot of Iranian army there. We've got many of those tribes all there now mentioned in Psalm 83. That's the first time in history I know that this has happened. This is moving at a phenomenal pace at the present moment. This has been coming together as the Islamics want to destroy the Jewish state. I mean, goodness, how many times have they said they want to destroy it? I mean, Hamas won't even recognize them. Hezbollah has got 60,000 rockets pointing at them. They have assembled huge armaments, and this is being done under cover of a civil war against Assad. And they're getting a lot of practice there, fighting in the area, fighting each other. For instance, the Syrian army has just lost 2 battles, one for the Jewish, the Golan Heights, and they've also lost another one. And those battles were lost to Al-Qaeda, which are highly trained, etc. And now they're eyeball to eyeball with the Jewish army. This is exactly where they wanted to be. And of course, you've got the Al-Quds Brigade, which has been specifically trained in Iran to take Jerusalem off the Jews. So this is, this is not going to be easy. This is a very bad situation. I mean, right now we've got President of America going to there. He's going to visit Jerusalem, and they've had to put in Iron Dome rockets and various other missiles to try and protect Air Force One as it comes in. That's how bad things have become. Complete destruction. The Bible confirms that there the Islamics will go down absolute destruction. Israel will expand from its present sliver of land. The Islamics want to take away from it, and because of this, it will grow to a vast territory, from the Nile in the south to the river Euphrates in the north, to the Indian Ocean in the east. The book of Isaiah states that Egypt will be terrified of Judah. Never before has this happened in history, which I've already stated. There is so much going on at the present moment that few can take it all in. Egypt destroys its economy. The Bible, as I've already mentioned, also confirms that 5 Egyptian cities will speak the language of Canaan. The language of Canaan today is Hebrew. So they're going to lose 5 cities, and I think that those cities will be located on the Israeli side, because they're going to lose Sinai, they're going to lose that area of land, and they're going to lose it right up to Egypt. To the Euphrates. So it's from Egypt in the south, Nile, right the way through to the Euphrates. The Egyptian economy will be destroyed. This has already started. The new US Secretary of State warned that only 4 billion left in their reserves for 80 million people. Egypt's economy has collapsed by 50% already and is going down because people don't want to go there for tourism. You know, it's becoming an iffy state, and especially when those that balloon went down, killing 19 people. Who wants to go on a balloon? I wouldn't. The Islamic world is going down to huge defeat. The persecution of Christians in Egypt will be punished as confirmed in Isaiah. It says there that if you look, you'll see that Yeshua says, Yahweh says, he will arrive in a cloud and destroy them for what they're doing. Because they're attacking the Coptic church. They're killing people for no reason at all. As Morsi said, he wants to create this into a militant Muslim state, and everybody will be Muslim. Well, they're attacking, and you know what? They're saying nothing about it in our press in the West. The constant attacks on Israel and the Jews will cause an unbelievable destruction all over the Islamic world. Yahweh has a plan for the Jews and Israel. Nations getting in the way will be cut to pieces and destroyed. In the end, this will happen during the Second War. Because there's going to be 2. You're going to have the first war and then the second war. The first war is going to sort out all those nations surrounding Israel. And you know what we're looking at here is a war with using probably nuclear, but probably more than likely neutron bombs. Now, you know, the Jews are very clever people. I mean, I'm not Jewish, but I did in actual fact at one stage attend a school, which was not a Jewish school, but you know, if there was 30 boys in my class, when there was Jewish holiday, 25 went off, left 5 of us there in the form, and you know, that was how many Jews were there. So I learned a lot about the Jews. Very clever, very hard-working, knowledgeable people, and that is why Israel is one of the top technical countries on the planet, and are responsible for a lot of the work on our mobile phones, etc. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, the Americans know that if they give them a piece of equipment, it will come out 10 times better, because they're going to use it and they're going to find out what its weakness is going to be. So, as I say, Yahweh has a plan for the Jews and Israel. We say, well, the Jews are Israel. That is not true. Jews and Israel are different nations. You can see it in the Bible. You had the Jews in the south. Firstly, you had Israel, and the last king that had a united Israel was Solomon. And then what happened is, when he died, because he'd been warned it would be torn to pieces, his son Rehoboam became the king, and it was ripped out of Rehoboam's hands because of a tax argument, and they appointed Jeroboam, who was actually Solomon's advisor, as king up there. And they separated, and then nearly went to war a few times, and they actually had alliances differently. So Israel is not Judah, and Judah is not Israel. So Israel is a nation that comprised of the Jews and Ephraim and Manasseh and Asher and Reuben, all these different tribes. The Jews were one of the smaller of those tribes, but they were the ruling tribe, because Solomon, all these, and David came from that side of it. He, in actual fact, messed it up and he was warned about it because he was breaking Yahweh's law. And Yahweh said he would break it away, and he did. And so you got the tribes of the north. The northern tribes went into captivity about 100 to 120 years later, 120 years before the Jews in Jerusalem. The the Ninevites or Assyrians came down under Tiglath-Pileser and took the 10 tribes, conquered Samaria, which was their capital, and took them all into captivity. And the Jews remained independent until Nebuchadnezzar came along and captured them about 110 to 120 years later. So there are two nations. Now, where are the other nations? Well, that is the subject of another study. But they are there, and very powerful nations today, the Israelitish nations, and the Jews are there, and that is a time watch from the time of the establishment of the Jewish state, or the instruction going out, which went out in November 1947. There's 70 years, or a generation, as it says, will not pass before the end of everything comes. That generation is now, and that time finishes in 2017. Destruction of mighty nations. These nations that persecuted Jews have been destroyed. The end of their 2,500-year curse and wanderings as a result of rebellion against Yahweh came to an end when that period from the Babylonian captivity till 1917, Muslim year 1335, came to an end. Now the year 1335 is mentioned in the Bible. 1917, so the coins have been issued with both those on, because 1335 was the Muslim year, the very last year, up to November was November 1917, when the Muslims were ruling, and the Christian calendar was November 1917, and those dates are mentioned. And incidentally, that was the very end, to the very day, to the very hour of the 2,520-year curse, which came into effect 604 BC, when Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem. Tsarist Russia was one that persecuted the Jews. The last Tsar persecuted the Jews. I could not understand why Russia collapsed, why the Tsar died, and then of course I realized it was under that Tsar that all the pogroms occurred. And he really persecuted Jews. Then we had Austria, and then we had Hitler's Nazi Germany, the Ottoman Empire, the Communist Soviet Union, all collapsed after persecuting the Jews. And Hitler's Germany went down really badly, really very badly. The destruction of the economies of the West. America and Britain and the EU are now trying to force Israel to give up more land and return to the indefensible 1967 borders. They are absolutely indefensible. The country's 9 miles wide at the narrowest point if that happens. I mean, these people clearly are trying to recreate the disaster under Hitler. The economies of all these enforcing nations are crashing. This problem is on a spiritual dimension. The governments appear helpless. For instance, the British debt, already at a massive 3 trillion when Labour lost power, has had another 700 billion added despite the massive cuts under the Conservative Liberals. So all that they've done has only added 700 billion on, which is worse than even under Labour. So we're in a serious nosedive here. Israel is keeping its powder dry despite lots of provocation, and that's been confirmed by the United Nations. According to a report written by the Secretary General, Israel is being very patient with what is going on around her. But now, you see, the Syrian army retreated, and now Al-Qaeda has taken over the Golan Heights. 5 shells come crashing into Israel from the Golan Heights suddenly. Now, this is going from bad to critical. Now, critical is when the place is burning and you've got a real problem. Because you must remember that Al-Qaeda has taken over the chemical and biological weapons from the Syrian government. Quite a lot of them. And all you've got to do is put a thimbleful in a artillery shell and fire it. When it gets to the other end, it explodes, and all those biological weapons and chemicals are spread over a large area. And you start killing people more than you ever have. Where the wind blows, it is taken as well. Every rocket that takes off from those areas now, whether it be Hamas or Syria towards Israel, have got to be, well, you can't monitor them. It's just impossible. So any shell or rocket could contain the biological or chemical weapons. It's come to this, that I think the American word for it is cut fish, cut bait, I think it is. They've come to a time when waiting is at an end, because these Islamics are going to fire those shells and those rockets. Remember that the Hezbollah have got 60,000 of them. See, that's when it goes from bad to critical. 60,000 rockets, how do you stop them? Iron Dome can't stop them. It was already selecting rockets to fire at when it was following the trajectory. And if it was going to end up in the desert, they left it. If it was going to end up in a city, they fired it. So they killed hundreds of the rockets, but there's thousands sent. So if you've got 60,000 rockets heading for Israel, you won't be able to, they'll be swamped. Even the Patriot batteries can't handle that. So Israel's time for waiting is at an end. Nuclear neutron bombs. Now, these Islamics are taking on something they clearly do not understand. Well, they should. They've lost 6 times, or between 4 and 5 times to Israel, probably 6 times in the last war. They should understand that there's something wrong. They should remember what the colonel of the Syrian army said when they asked him why he didn't go ahead with his tanks, all his tanks, and take on the one Israeli tank that was in his way. He said, well, sir, you wouldn't have either. There was a big hand in front of me with a whole lot of angelic beings in front of me. And there we are. So he didn't. So the one tank stood there, and he could see this apparition which frightened the living daylights. But there's a lot of reports like that all over. Matter of fact, in one particular area, the Israeli army, when they were fighting, suddenly ran out of ammunition, and they couldn't fire back. And then the Islamics realized that they couldn't fire back, and they ran towards them. And they all said, the Israelis said, well, we're dead. And suddenly they looked up and they saw these men turn around and scamper and run away. And they captured a few of them and said, what happened? And they said, we saw these angels above you. Didn't you see them? We saw them clearly. So then we've got the Bible has revealed something in Deuteronomy 33:24 and Job 29:6. It's about the tribe of Asher's ancient tribal land in Israel, which is in the north on the coast of Israel. It says that Asher is very fortunate. His heels are in oil. In the tribal land of Asher, a massive 250 billion barrels of oil has been found, which puts Israel on the same level as Saudi Arabia, who had or has 260 billion barrels of oil. But that is on the first look. And it was always thought Israel had no raw materials until 2 years ago. But on top of that, they first found 8 trillion, then it went to 9, then 13, and then 15, 18, and now 20 trillion cubic feet of gas has been found. Now this puts Israel in one of the greatest energy reserve countries on the planet. And it can supply the whole of Europe. So Europe is going to have to start listening to Israel a little bit better than she has in the past, and stop telling lies. Bible facts. Once again, this is on a spiritual dimension that no one could have conceived. Only we who study the Bible and implicitly believe in all it says understand its accuracy. A clear example of Israel's energy discoveries shows us that that if you looked at the Trial of Ashur, you'd be expecting oil to be found. Of course you would. I could fill hundreds of pages with its factual history, science, archaeology, but rather read it yourself. After all, there are over 8 billion Bibles on earth, so there can't be one far from you. When I talk about this, just as an example, I'll talk about quantum mechanics or quantum physics, discovered and implemented by Max Planck. Brilliant, and of course he in actual fact set up the Max Planck Institute. It's a very prestigious institute which all top people want to join in the sciences. And in the Bible is the whole theory of that, of the whole of quantum mechanics, all laid out, and few know about it. So when I say that we have great faith in the Bible, it is because of long experience. There's a lot more I could show you, but we're coming to the end of this now. A crushing defeat. Unless Islam stops, it will suffer a crushing defeat. There is time, but only very little time left. The Islamic green horse rode once, and it was a disaster. They killed hundreds of millions of people. It is now trying to ride again, but sudden destruction will fall on the heads of those from Egypt to the Euphrates and further afield. And they don't seem to understand this, although they should have realized from what happened in the past that there's to take on Israel, the Jewish state of Israel, seems to be a problem. No matter how small the population is, remember Israel is a population today of just on 7 million. The surrounding Arab states that are taking on over 400 million. The observance of the Sabbaths and feasts are to be observed. All Bible students, together with all believing people, prepare yourselves by observing the annual feasts and Sabbath that Yeshua and his disciples observed and continue to observe 70 years after the crucifixion of the Messiah. Further, their descendants appeared before the pagan emperor Constantine in 325 AD to witness to him when he was setting up the Catholic Church that the true way, as they called themselves, was by confirming the truth that was once delivered, and that was to observe all these things. And he said, I'm not going to Judaize. It was not Jewish. In actual fact, it was the way that had been always revealed by the Bible. The only sign between Yahweh and his people, Ezekiel 20:12. Moreover, also I gave them my Sabbath, to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am Yahweh, who sanctifies them. Now please bear in mind, Yeshua observed the Sabbaths, and all the disciples continued to observe the Sabbaths, and said that the 10 Commandments were in force, and the laws are in force, and they said that any man who doesn't observe these things, who says he knows me, that's Yeshua talking, Jesus talking, is a liar and he doesn't know me. Isn't that amazing? Yet they keep on saying all this has been done away. In Exodus 31, 13 to 17, speak thou also unto the children of Israel, that's the 13 tribes, the Jews only being one of them, saying, Verily my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am Yahweh, that doth sanctify you. Now, where's this thing in? If once again, right up to the last disciple being alive, which was probably John, about 100 AD, then on to 325 AD, the direct descendants in the Quaternary controversy were stood before the pagan emperor Constantine, who really didn't want them there and who would like to have killed them, I think, risked their lives to say to him, this is the way forward. You do not do what you're doing. But Constantine, you see, was trying to unite the empire, and he wasn't listening, and he chased them out. And that is why today we have Easter, which is to the goddess Ishtar, Lent, which is another pagan feast. And then, of course, you've got Christmas, which, of course, is the Saturnalia, which was the 25th, and they used to put up Christmas trees and light fires, candles on them, and light lit fires to encourage the sun to come back, because that was the dead of winter. Yet if you go to Jeremiah 10, you'll see that you're told not to observe that. So get ready and make sure Yahweh and his Messiah recognize you as theirs. Very important. I'm afraid that if you look into Revelation, you'll see that it says the whole world is deceived. What are they deceived about? Well, when they say the laws are being done away with, in the Bible hundreds of times say they have not been done away with. And I've had that discussion. I've said to these ministers, I said, well, show me where